Maybe joining it. Yes, the meeting will be pleased come to order. I'd like to welcome our members and visitors and staff to the first meeting, January 11th, 2023. Hard to say those numbers of the North Clackamas Parks and Rec District Advisory Committee. This meeting is being obviously done by Zoom and being recorded. So I assume everyone got a copy of their last meeting summary. Was distributed and reviewed. Are there any corrections or additions to the meeting summary? I had a question, and it's only because I couldn't understand what it was saying. The one in the bottom of the first page, just before public comment, it says system plan and CIP timeline. What it says is the first step is going through procurement. This is around a 6-month process. And after the procurement process, we'll do public solicitation, blah, blah, blah. Where are we in that process? That's the part that's not clear to me.
I'll be given a report in the status updates on that.
Okay, good. Other than that, I just didn't understand where that was in time in the summary. So, okay, good. So hearing none, the meeting summary is accepted as submitted. Thank you all. First agenda item is the Metro Local Share Concord Community Park presentation.
All right, and Chair, as Alex is pulling up the presentation and Heather's here as well, I wanted to just apologize for this being a newly upgraded action item. And it'll come clear through the presentation, but there's some timing involved if we want to acquire these funds for the Concord project to keep it in line with the funding of the rest of the overall project. So that's why it's been upgraded to an action item. We're asking you to make a recommendation, but it's not the overall. As you'll see, there's many more steps. This is just the first in the process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather and Alex. And really, I think Alex.
Sorry, are you seeing a white screen? For some reason, it's not really showing up very well. Let me try to just view it full screen one more time. Is it showing up white?
Yeah, it's showing up white.
Would it be okay if I shared it through this smaller version of a PDF? Yeah,
we had problems with that last month too, I think on something. So yeah, just do with what you can.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. It's nice to meet you. And thanks for allowing me the time to present tonight. My name is Alex Gilbertson. I identify with she, her pronouns, and I am a landscape architect and one of the principal planners on Heather's planning team. Tonight, I'm going to cover a quick recap from the June DAC presentation on Metro Local Share. And then I will explain our current and future processes to determine eligible projects. And at the end of the presentation, I will ask for your recommendation. This presentation is about 10 minutes, so I'll be happy to take questions at the end. I don't want to repeat what you already learned from Heather in June, so I'm just going to provide some high-level points here. As you may recall, the Metro Nature for All bond passed in 2019, and the bond's major objectives include connecting people to nature, protecting clean water, and restoring fish and wildlife habitat. There are also some overarching priorities, which include addressing racial equity and making the region more resilient to climate change. This bond measure is in the amount of $475 million, and it is comprised of 6 funded programs. Metro intends to distribute $92 million of bond funds to park providers for land acquisition and eligible capital projects. So this local share program gave NCPRD access to approximately $4.5 million for projects that meet Metro's funding criteria. I won't read through the slide here because it's not showing up. but I wanted to put in a reminder slide. This slide illustrates that the bond measure also identified 5 types of capital investments as eligible for local share funding. So in addition to the criteria, a project must also fit into one of those 5 project types, which I don't know why none of these slides are showing up. Wondering if I should try to restart Adobe PDF.
I think so. That might do it, Alex. I think it's worth taking the 30 to 45 seconds to do that if you're okay with that.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing really quickly, and I'm going to try and open this PowerPoint one more time.
Yeah, Adobe can be a little bit of a stinker if you have it open for a while. It starts, I've noticed that.
Okay, let's try this again. If I go to full screen mode, hey, look at that. Okay,
Yay.
is that good?
Thank you.
Okay, so these are the 5 projects or the 5 types of eligible projects that I just mentioned. And so NCPRD has a list of potential projects, and in order to kind of make sense of all of it, we screened NCPRD specific project priorities, which are listed in the blue on the left. We screen those through the local share criteria, which are highlighted in the green box, and Concord Community Park rose to the top based on the evaluation of the criteria. Now you can see 2 placeholders under the eligible project column on the right. This is mainly because applying local share funds to this park, to Concord, would only use a portion of the $4.5 million total allocation. This could be 1, 2, 5 projects, but the bulk of the local share funding will need to be determined. But before I outline that process we're planning to follow to identify the remaining eligible projects, I did want to quickly cover what aspects of Concord local share funds can cover. Now, I realize this slide wasn't included in your packet, but I wanted to make sure to provide some clarity on what local share funds can cover. But first, it's important to note local share funds cannot be used to build new post and platform play structures, or ball fields, or spray grounds. It cannot be used for community center programming or staffing. However, during initial conversations, Metro gave the green light and provided confirmation of alignment for Concord Community Park, specifically for some aspects of the play area, the picnic shelter, and a possible restroom, which we wouldn't otherwise be able to fund. Okay, the future process. It's very similar to the current process I just covered, but so we will spend funds based on the NCPRD community-driven priorities in blue, and as well as the Metro bond criteria in green. As Heather updated to the DAC last month in December, the system plan is anticipated to kick off in May. The launch of the system plan will give us the space and time needed to listen to the community and meaningfully engage with people of color, Indigenous people, people with low incomes, people with varying abilities, and other historically marginalized groups. This engagement will help NCPRD staff understand what types of eligible projects best meet the community's priorities and needs. And you can kind of see all those pieces fitting together in the center of the 2 overlapping circles here. But before moving to the next slide, I want to reiterate, identifying communities' needs and values is critical to help inform and shape the future eligible projects. Okay, bouncing back to the current process. This slide illustrates the timeline needed to finalize an IGA for the Concord Community Park. In November, December, staff engaged with Metro to discuss this project, and Metro reviewed for alignment for criteria. Metro issued the green light, so here we are tonight presenting to you, asking for this committee to recommend the Concord Community Park as the first local share project for NCPRD. If we get your support tonight, we can then seek approval from the board of directors next month. Staff will then begin preparing the application and submit it to Metro for approval. We are looking at a springtime, April, May timeframe to prepare and finalize the IGA for the approved project. Once that's finalized, the IGA would then be approved by the board of directors and Metro. I also want to be clear about the timeline for identifying remaining eligible projects to receive local share funding. Beginning in the summer and aligning with the system plan engagement process, we will work with the community to identify community needs. Staff will develop the potential eligible project list and coordinate with Metro to review for criteria alignment. In the fall, this committee, the DAC, will review the eligible project list and recommend a final project list that we will then take to the board for approval. In the winter, we are expecting to revise the IGA, which I believe would essentially be an amendment to the Concord Community Park IGA if we go that route. This amendment would essentially add the approved project or project package. So tonight we are asking for your support and that you recommend Concord Community Park as the first local share project. As I mentioned, the remaining local share project or project package will be identified during the system planning community engagement process this upcoming summer. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will open it up to questions from the committee. Thanks.
Yes, Ben.
Thanks, Alex. I was going to ask, what is the dollar amount that you all are wanting to use from that $4 million for this project? And I'm assuming it's going to go towards a picnic shelter and the playground. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the project is currently in design and the consultants are currently developing estimates. So it is too early to tell, but it could range from like 250,000 to an amount more than that based on the final design. We want to leverage this investment that benefits the community, and we will absolutely need to weigh that with the yet to be determined eligible projects. But with Concord Community Park, there's still a lot of refinement that needs to take place. But tonight, we're really just asking for the DAC support to pursue using a portion of those local share dollars for Concord. But they would that money though would help fund the certain aspects of the play area, a picnic shelter, and a possible restroom.
Thanks. Missouri.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate your highlight of the community input several times. I guess first part's a statement, second part's a question. If you could include, could the DAC be included as early as possible in the engagement process? I'm trying to flip through your presentation. Summer 2023, the engagement process, because if we're not involved early, it's hard to gather community input, especially since it's the summer. We could walk around the neighborhood to then come back in the fall and make recommendations as requested. Just the earlier the better to meet your timeframes there. And then the second, the question What can we use for the local share in terms of, I know you gave some guidelines, so like, could we build a rainwater capture system in the event that when we have a natural disaster, that the community has a place to gather and drink fresh water when the pipes break? I'm confused there a little bit, or could you elaborate more on what can be done and what cannot be done?
Yeah, so there's a handbook, and the bond measure really explicitly states what can and cannot be used for these funds. And so we would need to use that as sort of our guidepost essentially, and need to basically double check with Metro to ensure there's alignment for the criteria. So I can't just flat out say, yes, that would be approved by Metro, because it's an iterative process, and we would have to work with them in order to figure out exactly how we shape a project. And so, so that's essentially the process that we would have to go through in order to figure out if we get Metro's green light. But then in addition, so I think going back to your other question about community engagement, I just want to reiterate that meaningful community engagement in this context is defined by Metro and required on their criteria, their terms, their requirements. And so investment in all of the program areas for the bond, it must satisfy all of the community engagement and racial equity criteria that is spelled out in the handbook and in the bond measure. We were able to move forward with Concord because Concord went through an extensive engagement process during the master planning, and Metro has reviewed that process to identify gaps. They have given us the okay to advance. However, I do want to note that additional community engagement for Concord is being planned for this spring. Our community engagement process for the system plan and then determining future eligible local share projects is still undetermined. It's still being defined. Our meeting dates aren't set yet. So yeah, I hear you on wanting to be engaged early. We're hoping to have more info on that timeline this spring. So I guess I could just end with, please stay tuned. We will be able to share more information about how you can engage in both of these processes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Missouri. Thank you, Alex. Yes, Dave.
I was a little bit confused too about what you can and can't use this funds for. You can't, for instance, you can't use it for a building like for the Concord Community Center itself.
Unfortunately, no.
Can you use it for planning another park like the park out in the other way out here? These have to be shovel ready parks, or does this have to be something that's ready to go? So that brings up to what is the time? How much time do you have to use these funds before you lose them? Thanks.
Once the IGA is finalized, the agreement terminates 10 years after the effective date. So once we have an IGA in place, we have essentially 10 years, and I believe the board and Metro can agree to one extension that's up to, I think, 2 years. So we could potentially have 12 years.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yes, Heather.
Why don't we have Katie go first? Because my comment.
Okay.
I'd actually like to move that we recommend Concord for the local share project at this time.
Second.
Great, thank you. Did you want to, all right, we're in the middle of that. So is there a second to that? Yes, Ben, your hand's up.
It was seconded by Ryan.
Oh. I didn't hear.
Sorry, I did have one more question related to the local shares. I fully support this project. I'm glad NCPRD finally kind of had Metro relook at it, because I don't know, last year sometime, Heather, you presented that Metro was not in favor of using local shares here. And so it's great to hear that that's been changed. But the one thing I want to kind of bring back, and I know this kind of the elephant in the room, and because Milwaukee Bay Park was kind of slated for local shares from NCPRD, and then the whole Milwaukee potentially looking at coming out of the district was based on after the BCC voted for not using local shares for Milwaukee Bay Park. That's kind of the order of things. And it's still undetermined if Milwaukee is going to leave the district or not. And I'm curious, if you all are kind of just waiting and seeing and kind of sitting on some local share decisions based on how that plays out for Milwaukee Bay Park.
Mike, do you want to take that one? Okay.
Yeah, basically what you said, Ben, nothing's off the table. If you recall, in Milwaukee Bay Park, there had been placeholder amount of about $3 million using Metro local share. If we've got 4.5, I don't think we're going to encroach on getting into even that money for the Concord project. But realistically, what we need to do is we need to have the community guide us on the rest of that. As Alex said, this is kind of that shovel-ready project that Metro had already looked at and has given the green light for. That future project schedule that Alex is talking about, we need to engage with the community and find out. Metro or Milwaukee Bay Park, hopefully City of Milwaukee stuff will be getting figured out sooner rather than later. But we need to get the conversation going on what the rest of the district wants us to use. And Milwaukee Bay Park, I would imagine, would still be part of priorities, at least in that list, but we need to start having that conversation.
Well, thank you, Ben. Although there was something said there that I was not aware of, I did not know that the governing board of NCPRD had declined to use local share funds. I thought it was still in negotiation as far as getting the IGA clarified. So did I miss something or misunderstand what just got said?
No, nothing was decided by the board on not using local share.
Okay.
There's just the hold on the Milwaukee Bay Park or the Milwaukee Bay Park project itself.
Correct. I thought I heard Ben say that they had declined to use local shares. So anyway, moving right on. Okay,
It is true. They did decline to use local shares towards Milwaukee Bay Park. I was in a meeting where I saw that vote happen. So that is, from what I understand, true. Literally a few weeks after that, Milwaukee, the council directed the city staff to look at themselves from the district based on one of the many thorns in the sides, including ECC's not approving the funding mechanism for Milwaukee Bay Park, which included share. And there's minutes and recordings that include that, and it looks like Paul's gonna say something.
You done, Ben?
That order? Yes, I'm done.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I concur with Mike on this. Perhaps that might be a Ben, all due respect, that might be an outcome that resulted out of maybe a conversation that it was interpreted as such as an outcome, but it was not deliberate that the board, I don't recall that the board decided that we would pull Metro local share funding for the sake of pulling Metro local share funding. That wasn't it. The hang up, and this should be an elephant in the room, it's public. The hang up is that NCPRD has had a history, unfortunately, of not having complete agreements in place for not everything, but for a number of things. And this kind of money requires agreements. And the city of Milwaukee, apparently, and I had a conversation directly with the mayor and the city manager more than a year ago. We spelled that out. We told them we didn't want to hang their project up, and we needed to get moving on these agreements. And the city has apparently taken a turn, and they're apparently not willing to help or be part of completing the agreements to put in place. These are public dollars. Our auditor has picked up on that as well. And, we have to dot our i's and cross our t's. That's a fiscal responsibility, and it's also an inherent responsibility of the elected board of directors.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas.
And
Okay,
Chair, just wanted to, just as a point of order, there is an active motion on the
I was
floor.
going to go right there. I just wanted to let that side comment. Ben wanted to finish his, and then I had a question about what he said, and now we're on to, we have a motion on the floor. Thank you for reminding me. And so it's time for discussion. And I have some discussion pieces about it. First of all, in line with moving forward, I would hope Alex and whoever else is being part of it, we will find out what are the kinds of things that would be included, like it says about protecting clear water. Well, there's a whole lot of water that runs down and off that site, and that's an example. But also about the community engagement process, it clearly calls for that. And so that we can be aware of what those guidelines are, it would be helpful if we knew, because the process that the sub areas in the unincorporated portion of NCPRD are working on specifically is expanding our outreach to connect with our residents, to have them be more engaged, specifically in the workings of NCPRD. So knowing what that outreach is, how are people being engaged, who's being engaged, what happens to the opinions that they provide, and then how are they put to use, are all things that we just have a real interest in. And so that I heard in Missouri's question, it is not like we want to take it over and do it our own way. We'd like to know how it is and what are the criteria. That's all. And thanks. And in the timeline, if we could know that before summer, that would be great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. First, keeping in mind, Alex made an important point that the reason we're able to move Concord forward is because in Metro's mind, when you're looking at the boxes being checked, we've already checked all the boxes for the Concord project, except for a few that will need to get revisited, and we will still do some community engagement. But the reason that we can move forward is because we had already done that extensive community engagement, which is why
Correct.
I'm sure one of those measures was that by doing what we're doing on the site, we're hopefully providing clear water, type things. But that's already been done. The boxes that need to be checked on the rest of them are that future project. And to the second point, what Heather and I have talked about, we're trying to develop how we would do it. Is my goal is when we start laying out the timeline for the community engagement for both the system plan, for this, for any of that, we have, and I think we've talked briefly with the group about this, we have essentially a calendar that we're able to give you as well, to say, here's the district's engagement efforts with public meetings and stakeholder groups and all of that. And here's a window of time that we ask the DAC to go out to their sub areas and gather however the individual sub areas want to gather information, so that all of it can be brought together. The public input from the NCPRD stuff, public input received from DAC and sub areas, and that's all put together into that comprehensive community outreach result. Mm-hmm. So that's our intent, is to be able to provide you a very defined timeline and time frame of here's when we need the DAC to be going out and doing their engagement.
Right. In that line with that, if having been part of the project for the Concord property and now creating a park at Concord, by the way, I don't want to start calling it Concord Park, because that's how names start to happen. It's a park at Concord, from my point of view still. But there was a lot of involvement from the task force members to help people get to and let them know about upcoming meetings to participate in. And so that was what that was, as opposed to an independent thing. And so here's what the DAC people said. No, it is to help, I don't know, round them up.
Yep.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have a point of clarification. So we are recommending this because it is checking all those boxes, and there is that sufficient. There were hundreds and hundreds of people who participated in all the Concord outreach stuff. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think that's great. But I want to make that point clear is that that part has been checked, that it has a strong community support for it. And it isn't more important than others. But yes, it's the first one that's going to be ready to go. So thanks.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay. Can we poll the participant, the DAC members?
Jessica, are you going to call the poll?
Yes, we'll start with Joel.
Yes.
Okay, Musiri,
Yes.
Onida,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
and Grover.
Yes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, and there's nobody else to be a decline or a abstention. So thank you. That passes 8-0.
Okay, next step on our end, just so that you all are aware, is we'll be preparing a staff report to go to the board, which then that is what initiates the process for the IGA. So we'll give you status updates as things progress along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next item is the annual goal setting subcommittee report or update. And I don't know who's doing that.
You want me to do it?
Sure.
Okay. So we met yesterday. Unfortunately, there were some cross wires and we couldn't actually have the meeting. A few members were missing. So we've rescheduled for the 17th and 26th. We're going to do 2 meetings, and it's specifically for the framework of what the goal setting is going to look like. It's not discussing any goals, just setting the framework, and we will have a facilitator running that meeting to help us create that framework. Is that good?
Thank you.
Question, Ryan, how is this set up? I didn't receive any communication.
Well, this was discussed in December meeting. We asked for volunteers to be part.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Sorry.
so it looks like we'll probably have, I'm just going to warn everybody here, Michael, we'll probably have the goal setting at the earliest February, but in my mind, I'm seeing it in March, which is still okay. We can still talk about, the year. It's just, we have to really set up the framework so that we can do this every year. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. Next item is the integrated pest management plan.
Okay. And let's see, Kevin, do you have the slides that you
I
can
do.
pull
If
up?
Jessica wants to give me access here.
Oh, yeah, we need to give Kevin access. And this is going to be a presentation in 2 parts. We're going to go over the first set of slides specifically about our integrated pest management. And then we have, is our guest here, Kevin? I haven't looked on.
Jessica said she was in the waiting room.
Okay, so we have, yep, there. So we have a guest joining us from a tree care inspection that we had performed.
Jessica, I'm sorry,
report.
Jessica, do I need to do something for you?
It says you should have access. Is it not allowing you to share screen?
I don't, there's no, you know how we practice and there was a button, there's no button.
Commissioner Savage, did you have something you want to interject here?
Yeah, while they're working out the technical issue there, I just want to ask the question at the goal setting, if there will be discussion or review of both the mission statement and the vision for NCPRD. Just a question.
I would definitely include that so that was the mission statement for NCPRD. And what was the other one?
The mission and the vision statement.
The vision, okay. All right.
They're both on, the current ones are on the website today, but I just want to know if you're going to be visiting those.
Well, I have a whole list of things that I would like to include in it, but what we opted for yesterday, because the facilitator is going to facilitate the process of creating it. So I'm happy to include those in my list of things to include.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we got the slides up. Kevin, if you advance, I can probably just run through the content.
Okay.
Just to clarify again, and we've covered some of this, our integrated pest management, it's a progressive and a sustainable approach to pest management, and we use a multifaceted strategy to reduce our economic, our health, and environmental risks. So it's truly integrated in everything that we do on this. Next slide. Our staff are involved in pest management, and everyone that works with pest management are trained and licensed through the state of Oregon Department of Agriculture, isn't it, Kevin?
Yes.
Yeah. They follow research-based best practices, and of the partners that we work with in that best practice management are listed here. I'm not going to read through all of them. You can see, and we covered this quite a bit in our last presentation as well. So this is a bit more review. Next slide.
I just wanted to point out that these are two of our staff members. It's Lauren Carey on the left and Joe Dalkey on the right, and that's our natural resource team there. So.
Thank you, Kevin. So when we talk about pest management, what are the pests that we're talking about? And we're really talking about a few main varieties. Most of what the discussion is this unwanted vegetation and these and invasive weeds, either non-native or otherwise invasive. A lot of broadleaf weeds. We've just called out a couple of the most common ones here: Himalayan blackberry, Japanese knotweed, several varieties of insects that we're on the lookout for and usually get notifications of potential problems. Any diseases, both with trees or any of the other natural areas around, rodents, other organisms, all of those are considered pests in our pest management program. Obviously, the top two are the ones that we probably deal with the most, the vegetation and insects. Next slide. Why do we need this integrated pest management? Because it makes it possible for us. We have lots and lots of acreage, and it makes it possible for us to responsibly care for our parks and rec sites with these hundreds of acres of both some developed, some undeveloped, some really truly natural areas, some just really undeveloped areas themselves. We need to have an IPM. As the stewards of that land, we are charged with maintaining this diverse set of landscapes to both be attractive. We want it to look nice, but we also want it to be in usable condition. We want it to be safe. We want it to be healthy for everybody involved. And not addressing these pests and weeds. If you don't have a proper non-use plan, it can have a lot of negative impacts on those natural areas, including all of our athletic turf fields. Next slide. So we have three kind of categories of IPM tactics, and these next three slides will cover those. And the first one is in this pest prevention. And so these are just several mechanisms and points about pest prevention, everything from mulching plant beds and mowing grass and brush that helps keep down on insect pests. Using the right fertilization ensures that we want the right plants grow and deters the unwanted plants. Strategic weed-free park design helps keep those growth problems at bay. So this is just in that kind of the prevention tactic, trying to stop problems before they occur. Next slide. The next set of tactics are your mechanical and your physical controls, typically the things that we're doing to both do some prevention, but really dealing with it. That's going out and mechanically weeding, hand weeding in areas, trapping invasive insects. And I think we've got a photo maybe in the next slide that shows some of that. And then having these staff-led volunteer work events to go out and cut out a bunch of the blackberries, or tackle a particular set of invasive weeds, or all different invasive weeds at particular areas. So those are our physical and mechanical controls. And then next slide are the naturally and synthetic derived herbicides and pesticides, which is placing these pheromone traps like you see here. Applying natural herbicides and pesticides and synthetic ones, and disinfecting the equipment after we're in areas to prevent the spread of pests. So if we're out treating an area, we want to make sure that we don't leave that area and take those problems somewhere else. And so that's in that third tactic. Next slide, please. So with safety being our absolute top concern for both our applicators and for park users, and safety of the plants and other animals that we don't want to keep away themselves, we have a science and research-based integrated pest management program that guides everything from everything, including our treatment protocols. We only, and these are just some points, and I know we've made them in our previous presentation as well, but herbicides are only used when necessary to protect the habitat around there, the trees, the plantings, and the facilities. When we do have the necessity to use it, we use spot treatment for targeted weeds. We don't go and do a broad application at any of our parks. We use as minimal of amount of herbicide as we possibly can to be effective, and use it as a vegetation management tool. So we try and really be very sparse in when we use it and how. Keeping in mind, to reiterate, any pesticides or herbicides are being applied by licensed personnel, and we put up signage during and after the application to let the public know, hey, something was applied here, to both, hopefully protect themselves, any pets, any children, anybody from potentially getting into that area after an application. Next slide. That was the last slide on our integrated pest management. This might be a time to take questions about the IPM before we move into the tree ecology report. Ryan?
Yeah, just a quick question for Kevin. So glad to see you guys do signage. That's awesome. Do you use, I know, like highly acidic vinegar, the higher the acidity. Have you guys tried using those kinds of methods? And if you do you have to post signage? I know it's this little detail.
Yeah, we have sprayed vinegar. We don't, it's not really something we use a lot of. If we're going to use vinegar, we normally just would do mechanical methods, because it doesn't really get rid of the weeds. It just kind of kills the top of them, and then they come right back up. But yes, anytime we apply any sort of pesticide or herbicide at all, we have to we're required to post. So by the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
And the vinegar is really not that hard. That's kind of hard on the soil too.
Yeah, it has other. It is effective in burning the weeds, but it also has other environmental impacts to some other wildlife and habitat and vegetation as well. So, I mean, it's another selective way to treat herbicides. But.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kevin. Yes, Missouri.
How often are methods reevaluated, or how often is re-education applied to determine whether the best practice currently could be mutated to a new best practice?
Sure, that's a good question. We every year we have continuing education, and we have to have so many hours of credits, and we usually go to the Oregon State University Extension Services pesticide and herbicide classes put on by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So every winter we spend about a day and a half in a classroom with speakers that go through new methods and new techniques and studies, and that's how we keep up on that stuff.
Cool, thank you. And do you guys do any experimentation on your own outside of the class, the learning that takes place?
No, we have to follow Oregon Department of Agricultural guidelines, and it has to be an approved herbicide or pesticide to be able to use it at all. So we leave the experimentation to them. and when they approve something, then they let us know, because you can only use certain things on certain weeds, so you have to target specific weeds with specific methods and techniques. So
thank you.
yeah, thank you. And then yeah, I'm sorry, are there any more questions before we move on to the Alma Myra tree assessment?
No, I just want to, I guess I want to make a little quick comment. I know that in a previous conversation, we talked about that other organizations that manage big parks have used things that were without using herbicides, and as opposed to using a different kind of herbicide or whatnot. So there were other methods, and I when I heard Missouri's question, that's what that brought to mind. And we don't need to answer that now, but it isn't about trying a different herbicide, it's trying a different systemic method of, and I think it'll come up when we talk to the recommendations for the Alma Myra Park as well.
Sure. Okay. And we have Ruth Williams with us, and she's with Tricology, and they did this study. Ruth, can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Whenever you're ready, I can go through the slides here, and you just tell me when to go to the next one.
Sure. Do you can you see me, or do you not?
I cannot see you. Can anybody see Ruth?
How do I make that a thing? I don't see an option for that.
Okay. Well,
which is fine, but if you find out how, I'm happy to be visible.
Okay, we'll have Jessica work on that while you're talking here.
Okay, so my name is Ruth Williams, and I'm with Tricology Consulting Group. We were asked to look at Alma Myra Park for some really specific reasons. So Tricology is a arborist consulting group that works regionally to help folks understand what might be going on with their trees, what we can do to help, what different options are, and ultimately, like, if specific maintenance recommendations are needed. And so we have provided some of those to park staff. So next slide. So for this specific park, we wanted to assess the park trees, look at how they're being taken care of, and determine like future steps, the best future steps. Next slide. And we had a really specific assignment to look for herbicide damage or specific diseases. We looked really specifically for herbicide damage. We did not find any evidence of that. We looked for a really common condition for this type of like stand in an urban environment with this kind of basal trunk swelling. We would be concerned about laminated root rot in this kind of like remnant stand. We did not send tests in to determine whether that's present or not, but we have a pretty strong suspicion that may be present due to previous failures. And then we looked for definitive signs of root impacts from the trail construction. None of that was found. We also looked for nutrient deficiency. None of that is found at this time that would help us give you a recommendation for nutrient application. Next slide. So this site is a really good candidate for mulch. We do recommend arborist supervision of equipment access for any future work in the site. some of the trees that we wanted to talk about were missing their tags, so we do recommend putting the tags back on those trees or adding new tags. And we do think that the site is a really good candidate for future assessment. There are, I think, 3 trees in the grove that we would specifically like to monitor. There was some dieback. There is a little bit of thinning canopy for some of the trees. We don't see that as consistent with herbicide application damages. We see that as consistent with other standard diseases that we see in Douglas fir remnant stands. Next slide. So based on that, our conclusion based on our assignment was that we felt like this park had an above average level of care. We did not see any signs of site contamination. We looked at the understory, and if there was herbicide damage, we would have seen signs, and we did not see them. And then overall tree health, we feel is average for a remnant stand of this type in this region. Next slide. Oh. Questions?
Thank you, Ruth.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we have Anita has her hand up first, and then Ben. Go ahead, Anita.
I hope you can hear me because my
Yes,
internet is a little unstable. But
we hear you fine.
okay, I know that there was some concern on the part of neighbors about the soil biome, about the mycelia and all the elements that are in the soil as to whether they were healthy. And I'm not saying that they weren't or anything. I'm just curious if that was assessed.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So in every soil microcosm, there are good guys and bad guys. And, you know, we have a sense that based on some basal swelling, there might be some laminated root rot in a couple of the trees. So that's a bad guy mycelium. We also saw, at the time of assessment, we saw several fungal fruiting bodies that indicate saprophytes. Saprophytes are just sort of like generally helpful soil organisms that tend to break down material there, which is actually good news, because when we start to see those mushrooms, we know that this has not been a highly impacted site. We would not expect to see those mushrooms in a super impacted urban environment. So we saw 2 different species of mushrooms on site. We think there's probably a relatively intact fungal microcosm involved in this site. It's so hard to say what is really going on underground, but we don't have a lot of really specific current concerns relating to soil compaction that would seriously damage the fungal hyphae.
Great, thank you. And now Ben, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. I'm curious if there's any recommendations for a site like this that has a large monoculture for like a succession plan. Given that, the dominant species there is fir. 20 years ago, we probably would have said, oh yeah, plant some Western red cedar, because that's like the end result. But now with climate change, Western red cedar isn't doing so hot in the uplands here. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that in a little site like this, and if you provided any succession recommendations to NCPRD.
I really appreciate that question. Succession was not part of our assignment, but I will say that the Douglas firs, while they have several have some signs of I would say slight stress, these are 100-year-old trees that have a 300-year lifestyle. So like, I think that those will stay. I do feel like the maples on site, especially since several of them have received significant storm damage, are sort of a dwindling understory. There is an opportunity for replenishing the understory, but overall, this site has a relatively intact overstructure of Doug fir canopy that I would not anticipate diminishing in 100-year time frame. And those of you who want to stick around for the longer one, you can talk to me after class.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Ben. Any more questions? Yeah, I do appreciate your, first of all, thank you NCPRD for doing this and getting this report to us. I very much appreciate it. It helps spell things out. And I also very much appreciate the recommendations. Are those recommendations likely to be carried forth, or do we talk about that at another time, or?
Yeah, we're definitely going to monitor the site. That was the recommendation, and we will definitely be monitoring the site. And we will be replacing the tree tags. There were some tree tags missing, and we have an arborist. We actually have an arborist on staff that can do all that. We got an independent study of this because we wanted to be unbiased and just give you the straight shot from someone who had nothing to do with NCPRD. So that was our intent with this study.
I appreciate it. And I definitely appreciate the recommendation for the mulching, which I know Kevin's big on that because I talked to him about it last summer.
And by the way, we're doing some pollinator garden work at that site, and we're going to bring a bunch of mulch in there with that project. And so we will be doing a lot of mulching at that site as well, which was also one of the recommendations.
Thank you. Any more questions? Commissioner Savage, your hand is up, or actually it'd be Director Savage.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I'm fond of trees. I was curious by Ben's statement that Western red cedars aren't doing so well. My understanding is that they're, number one, relatively hardy as long as they're well irrigated, and they're pretty disease resistant. Is there a strain or something I'm not aware of about Western red cedars?
Ruth, are you still here?
I'm here. I'm happy to speak to that. The arboriculture community is deeply concerned about the decline of Western red cedars. They have been studying it significantly. We don't have a definitive reason why Western red cedars of all ages seem to be declining suddenly for appearingly no reason. Some people have suggested it's a result of climate change, which is not a very satisfactory answer. It's very tough, but I will say that for my clients, I have stopped recommending it for planting.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. One thing I have learned is that they're generally very thirsty, so I make sure that they're well irrigated. And they seem to thrive in wet environments, and I think that's my learned experience. But I'll keep my eye out on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Savas, and thank you again for that, Ruth. And you're up, Ryan.
Yeah, I just down my hand. I just want to thank Kevin and your team for putting together the explanation and going over the integrated pest management. It's a great step forward to some of the questions that we had a couple months ago. I really appreciate the third-party assessment of the site to make sure that the community's queries were answered and their concerns were met with the third-party eye on it. So thank you, NCPRD, for all your work. Appreciate it.
Great, Anita.
Yes, I'd also like to thank NCPRD for being so responsive to the community and community members' concerns about this.
Super.
Okay, is there any more questions at all? I want to thank Ruth for coming as well. And then also, just a reminder, our integrated pest management program is online. So if you want to take a look at it again or whatever, if you have any other questions or anything, I'd be happy to take an email and answer any questions anybody had at a future date. So
thank you. Right.
Thank you, Kevin.
Next item. Changes or status updates. And I appreciate there's a bunch of it in the monthly division report. Are we going to cover these individually or going to go? I'm always at a loss. There's so much in there, and yet we call for it here. So are there changes that we're going to talk about here?
No, not really. These have just been the ones that were asked for to be standing,
Right.
issues. And now that the projects are moving, they're also, they're being reported in the division reports, I think, in more detail. I was just planning on giving kind of more of an overview on these standing items.
Please do.
So Milwaukee Bay Park, there's really nothing to report. Since we met last, there's not been any motion on the court action that we're waiting on. So we have nothing else to report. The project is still on hold. With Concord, there is quite a bit more information in the division reports on everything from some of the infrastructure repairs. We're refining the scope on that and getting more detail on that's the roof replacement and HVAC system and electrical system and the new elevator in preparation for the new library. But then there's also a lot of work going on with the library grounds development itself, the park area, the open space area, the pathway around, the play area, and all the rest of it. And there's there's a lot of that in detail in the report. What I did want to say is I really appreciate having a subject matter expert such as Alex on staff that comes with specific metro local share expertise and was able to, as you all had said, take a look and re-review the Concord project to be able to find some fairly significant pieces that I think we'll be able to accomplish using some of that money. So the rest of the stuff is again, I think more eloquently lined out in the division reports. SDC methodology update is the same as Milwaukee Bay Park because we had to put that on the shelf until the city of Milwaukee issue is figured out. We don't have any further motion on that. As far as NCPRD funding, the only thing I was going to add is we're not delayed. It's just things are not moving as quickly as we would like as far as budget. But I did say that I was going to give you a budget update at least in January. And what I would like to report is, if you recall, we had the budget submission form process that we laid out for either DAC members or any members of the public to submit recommendations for us to consider, specifically more on the capital repair and replace items or that size nature. We did get, I think, a total, and Jessica, if you have the number, I think the total was 10 or 11 submissions. To be fully honest, I think 8 or 9 of those submissions were for the same project. We're not looking at it as a popularity contest. But it does tell us that there's quite a bit of support. My intent is to recommend that we have that in our capital repair and replace budget. And we hope to be able to give a fuller budget update as far as where our numbers are looking in February. Our holdup right now is we don't have solid revenue numbers estimates yet, and we're still waiting for a lot of personnel and HR related numbers on the expenditure side. And so we just don't. I haven't even had a chance to look at a budget to see what overall it looks like. But I did want to give you that update as far as funding goes. And then there is a lot of information about the system plan and the CIP timeline, again, is really part of the system plan. And there is motion, again, moving forward on that. We hope to, I don't want to misspeak. I think it's be under contract or be getting things moving forward in that direction by May. So things are moving forward. And we're, again, really glad to have our planning staff on to be able to get that all rolling. It's still going to be a long process. It's not a 6-month deal and boom, we have a system plan. We are still estimating, I think, 12 months on some things, 18, possibly even 24 months on some other pieces. But that is something that we're hoping to show you at next month's meeting as well, is a strategic overview, or I guess a project overview, 1,000-foot look at all of the different things that we've got kind of going on concurrently, and with estimated timelines of when things are going to get started, when things we estimate to finish, so that everybody gets an idea of kind of the next few years, looking at that 1,000-foot view, which will give a lot more clarity on parts of the system plan, trails plan, CIP timelines, things like that. We're real close to having that. It just wasn't ready this month yet. And so if there's any questions on any of those things.
I just had one just to clarify, and I appreciate what you just said, and it sounds like it's in motion. But I remember back in December of 2021, that was the last time that I remember we looked at the CIP list, and we approved to let it be used for the SDCs, and there was some conversation about updating some of the data and the costs and the expense anyway. And I was just wondering, is that still on, is that on hold also because of the SDCs, or is that moving forward? Because I specifically remember so many people talked about how dauntingly that list was and how out of date it was. So instead of wait till it's all pristine, are we going to be able to do some work moving it forward?
Were you listening in on Heather's and my conversation just a few hours ago? Literally, we were talking about that.
I put a bug on your vest, didn't you?
No fair, Grover.
Yeah, the short answer, Grover, was what we did back then was we were getting, it was, I forget what did we call it, an interim CIP list, recognizing that we had an old list for things to be considered in the SDC methodology. We needed to add a few things on, so we created this interim CIP list. That is and remains an interim process. It's not updating the overall CIP list. It was just so that we could get the legitimacy for the consultants to be able to include those needed projects to be added for it to be considered for the SDC methodology. So short answer is it's still at part of the SDC methodology process. But there's really, other than Heather did do cost update estimating, and I don't know, Heather, is that something we could probably send to the group with that list with revised costs that we had come up with. But it's still kind of a working document, because once the SDC gets revisited, we're going to be doing updating, because unfortunately costs don't go down as time goes on. But the longer answer is we are considering coming to both the board and to start with the DAC to try and get a couple of projects legitimately added on to the CIP list. Not to revisit the whole CIP, that's still the 2007 document, and the new CIP list won't be done until we finish the systems plan. But for us to use SDC dollars on projects, they have to be on our CIP list. And a couple biggies, one of them being Concord, is not on our actual full CIP list. What we're trying to do is make sure that we present it in as least confusing possible process, because we're not doing a full CIP uplift. We're truly just adding a couple of projects on so that they're eligible for SDC funding. So that's what we were just literally talking about before this meeting earlier. And I need to process and talk with staff more on how we can get that, so that when we are developing next year's budget, we are actually able to use some of that funding that right now we're not able to.
Great. Well, so maybe next month you could just give us some heads up on where we
Will do.
are on it at that
Yep.
time. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, so that covers the changes of status and the like. Any other questions for, oh, I'm sorry, Katie, go ahead.
I kind of had a question for Mike. I'm wondering, I see one of the local share options is to use things for trails, and I'm just wondering if there's any proposal for any trails in the district, or if there's any ideas around that at this time, or is that just a possibility that hasn't been explored?
Heather, you want to take that?
She's using the same bug that Grover's
Right,
using.
yeah, I was gonna
Because
say,
we were
just-
also just talking about this today. I swear, we're not making this up. We actually have a list of trails in that SDC project list, which, you know, can double as a CIP. We could potentially look at using local share for trail projects. It's more an issue of readiness. Part of the challenge with the trails, without getting into a lot of detail at this meeting, is just, you know, they're so segmented and a lot of them, because they're not right of way, which is what the county and the city deal with, because they deal with the right of way projects. It's on private property. It tends to be in a mix of public and private property. So we have to be just thoughtful about creating corridors and then working through opportunities as they emerge. You know, doing a whole corridor at once is a little bit rare, but that's our goal in the long run, is to create a corridor. So we'll be looking at those corridors in more detail, but for now they're at least on our SDC list. And so once we do finish the SDC methodology, they would also be SDC eligible, but nothing would prevent them from being potentially eligible for local share money, except for the fact that we need to do engagement work just like we do for the system plan, and we need to get some of those projects, if they do bubble up as top priorities, we need to get them into a more shovel ready position. We're a bit ways out from that right now from where we sit, but it doesn't mean it's not impossible. We will be coming back as early as next month to talk a little bit about the trails, because we have what I would call just a very prudent step right now to make sure Metro is aware of the trails that we're trying to work on, so they can be rolled into Metro's what they call their RTP, their regional transportation plan. They're updating it from 2018. So we'll be back at the next meeting, I think, pending confirmation. We'll be back to share a little bit more information with you about that. It's all about making sure we're coordinating with our local, state, and regional partners, and having access to funding. So, yeah, I hope that's a partial answer, and we'll hopefully be able to talk about it more at next month's meeting.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Heather. Yes, Director Savis.
Yeah, I just want to mention, I forgot exactly where it leads to, but on the north side of the Concord property, as you know, is Olive Street. And when Olive reaches Risley, there's a crosswalk there which connects to Kellogg, and Kellogg is part of the essential pedestrian network. And I forgot was how it continues to the south towards the Concord property, or if it deviates somewhere else. But I just wonder if that might be an opportunity to take advantage of that essential pedestrian network and capitalize on some walkway through the property, and as it navigates over to Concord Avenue. But don't know, or frankly to other areas as well. But if you can look into that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
And at a different time, I'd like to talk to you about what the south side of Concord down this way is, because there's room for an opportunity there. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Anita.
Well, when I spent some time with Tanya in the Hull property, she mentioned the possibility of walking trails through that, and it wouldn't necessarily be so transportation oriented as recreational trails, but I thought it was a pretty exciting possibility. So I hope that the Hull property trails will be on somebody's radar at some point.
Yeah, part of our systems plan, remember, is we're also going to be trying to undertake a comprehensive trails plan, which, you know, will hopefully bring to light all of the all of the areas that are should be focused on in our priorities.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, I hate to bring this up again, but You know, the only regional trail in our district is the trolley trail, correct? And some of the local share funding was going to go towards the trolley trail that is on the upland part of Milwaukee Bay Park, and that was on hold. That is on hold. So yes, the district, I believe, has been looking at using some of the local shares for regional trails. But again, that funding was denied at the time, and it's kind of being sat on our hands.
Do you want a response from someone?
Again, we're going to be revisiting
say it
all
again.
of
Oh,
all of the
excuse me.
metro local share options as we move forward. So, you know, nothing in my mind is off the table unless it's truly an ineligible, you know, project, which again, it's got to meet all the criteria. But my intent is we're going to be taking a fresh set of eyes to look at, you know, how to use the rest of the money.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Seeing no more hands. Do we have people in the, oh no, I saw Heather's hands up now.
Thanks, Grover. Just a super quick clarification on the trail piece at Milwaukee Bay Park. We did apply with support from the city of Milwaukee for a trails bond grant, which is also bond funding, but it's not local share. And we did get selected along with several other projects. That being said, that is on hold at the moment, but Metro's a partner with us, and they're waiting on hold patiently as we figure things out. But there is some money for the trail work at Milwaukee Bay Park through the trails bond funding, same bond measure, just a different bucket. So just want to offer that clarification. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks. Do we have people in the public gallery, audience, etc.? And if so, it's opportunity for public comment.
Looks like Jan Carruthers has her hand up.
Okay. There she is.
Hi, good
Yes,
evening.
Miss Carruthers.
Good evening, thank you. I wanted to say that I appreciate the conversation, the continuing conversation about public involvement. And I also am aware from the last board of directors meeting that there was a new idea proposed at that time of looking at a change in governance for the district. And I don't know if that is even a conversation that you're having right this minute, but I do know that if anything like that were to happen over the next year or 2 years, the public needs to be very aware of all of the progress of the DAC. So each of the things that you've mentioned seems to have a separate piece of public involvement for the CIP, for the systems plan, for the park at Jennings Lodge School, for Concord, not so much because you are saying you've already done that in its entirety. But the idea of what does the public think is a priority and how the DAC makes its priorities, all of that information is going to be terrifically important. I'm just hoping that when you look at public involvement, you look at it comprehensively so that the public learns and learns and learns through each effort, because otherwise they will not understand. And by the way, just for my own sake, I recommend using master plan at the same time as you use systems plan, because you see Ryan is shaking his head no. So what's the difference? From a public's perspective, one needs to know that. And that's all the kind of thing I'm saying is there's a lot of information and we kind of bandy about public participation. So it needs to be, that plan needs to be quite clear from my perspective. So thanks for all your good work. And that's all I had to say. And Ryan, if you have something to say about that, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I just point out just a few things. The CIP and the system planning process, they are interlinked. The system planning process creates the hierarchy of priorities for the district. And from that, we'll kick out a CIP 5-year, could be 15-year CIP. That's pretty standard. Prioritization criteria is also something I'd love to see in the system plan, which I know Heather is like going through all the details and her whole team. Master plan, system plan is your entire, master plan is an antiquated term. It's mainly used for a park. And unfortunately, park planners love to use master plan for everything, and it started to confuse everything. So the newer term is system plan because it integrates more than just built spaces. It integrates operations, programs, as well as built spaces. So I think one thing I'd like to say is like what I really appreciate about this group and the district and the hiring at the district is that in the past there may have been some or lack of outreach, a lot of those things, and that's in the past. And I want us to all remember that we're moving forward and that we need to start living in the now and looking at the future and how we can do better than we did in the past. So I see a lot of effort being done by the district to create those outreach opportunities. And there's a lot of online mechanisms that we can use to really reach a lot of people. So I think we're getting there, you guys. Is there any comment on that?
Are you done, Jan?
Oh, I assumed I was off mic by that time. Thanks, Ryan. I got that, but that's the very point I'm trying to make, is just to clarify, even to clarify for the public what outreach is. You know, the fact that there's something online means that that's how your opinion is going to get recorded, just to keep the public learning all the time, so that when it comes time to create a new bond, a new governing structure, everybody will say, yay, woohoo, that's great. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Chair, you have Kathy from the public also has her hand up.
Okay, great. Kathy, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having Treecology come in and do the assessment. During the summary, she mentioned, I think there was 6 things in the recommendations on the report. She mentioned a couple of them. I'm representing the neighbors that abut the park, basically. And we were wondering about a timeline. The suggestion number 4 was a forest pathologist providing additional evaluation for either the possibility of beetle infestation or laminated root rot, and then additional assessments for unusual basal swelling and red ring rot. So my neighbors are asking, you know, based on this report, to find out if that, what kind of a timeline that would be. Because in number 1, it said, you know, just maintenance and review every 5 to 7 years. And yay for mulch. So that was also, so those 3 things, forest pathologist and additional assessments, and then the planned mulch timeline.
This is Kevin. Some of those we're doing, like the mulch we're going to do this winter. That's the plan for that. The other 2, I need to get with Treecology and see, you know, what the cost would be of that and what the timeline would be to put a contract together for them to give us more information on those items.
Awesome. They do mention in their observations that they consider there may be a pocket of laminated root rot in the center of the park. Several of the houses are close enough. If a tree fell, it would damage their house.
Sure. No, we regularly check on those trees and we monitor their condition. Every time we have a storm or wind event, we go out there and we monitor what's going on there pretty regularly. And we've been out there a lot this year because there's been a lot of wind events and
ice events. Lots of street. I've been here now 10 years. Yeah. And so appreciate the work that you guys have done over there. It's just in my photography and watching things getting worse, and you know, everybody's experiencing that with climate change and what have you. But I would like to be able to tell them then mulching this winter and checking with tree ecology as far as a cost and a contract for the other two items.
Yeah, we'll take their recommendations. We do have to get 3 quotes
You
on.
faded away.
I'm sorry, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We have a process that we have to go through the county to get quotes, multiple quotes on ongoing contracts like this. So it will take a little bit of time to get that together once we determine what the full scope would be on that. So, but we are working toward that.
Okay, and just to be clear, because what I was looking at laminated root rot, it looked like it was kind of fatal. And
Yeah, I am not an arborist. I am relying on their report. So we will be looking into that.
okay, very good. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, staff. Appreciate all your
Great.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you all. All right. Any more public comment? Hands up?
Nope.
Okay, that closes public comment. DAC member reports. Anita's hands up.
Yeah, the one thing that still comes up about River Villa Park in sub-area 2 is the issue of people racing cars late at night that have modified mufflers, are pretty noisy, up either of the 2 roads that take you to River Villa Park, and also noise in the park, late night noise. And there are gates at the park, but they are never closed. And so the question comes up from some of the neighbors and also people who live at a certain distance, because the cars still race by their homes, even if they're at a distance from the park. So the question arises again about, could there be automatic gate closure using those gates? And I know there's electricity in the park from the lighting at the restroom. So I just wanted to pass that on as input from the people who live around River Villa Park.
And what I can say right now on it is it is being considered. We're looking at costs involved and how that might fit into next year's budget. So we're not ignoring anybody, but there is a process for us to just try and figure out what's the best. Is that going to create problems where people are going to try and pull the gates down because they're used to running through, or we don't want to create other problems? So we're taking a look at it, and we're getting prices of what it would take to automate and motorize the gates. So we'll have more information forthcoming as soon as we can get it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know there's complexity here.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and for those who don't know, that was actually sent in to the DAC also on December 28th. Yes, Joel.
Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. Couple of quick things. Just wanted to highlight with the Milwaukee Community Center, our district's community center that's coming up in the month of January, that I hope you guys share with all of your friends and neighbors. The Lunar New Year celebration happening on Sunday, January 22nd. I believe it's noon when that starts, and that's an annual event that's pretty terrific. So please come down and check that out. I know that this is also covered in the division reports, I believe, but that's a great event that I'd hope you guys will all share. Also, another thing that's happening again this year is tax aid, or that's at least what we used to call it, but the Milwaukee Community Center partners with AARP and provides tax preparation assistance to our district's elderly and low-income families that need it. And I believe the Milwaukee Community Center is now taking appointments for that. Appointments are may be required this year. I know there have been in the past some walk-ins, but please make sure you share that with folks in your areas that may need that sort of assistance. I don't have a link to share with that, but I would encourage you to call the Milwaukee Community Center to get more information or direct them that way. We are looking forward to our first board meeting, the Milwaukee Community Center Advisory Board for Clackamas County this Friday as a fully formed board, which I'm excited about. We've got great representation from all the sub areas, and we are meeting on Friday at 9:30 as we do every month. We did skip our December meeting, so I don't have a lot of new stuff to report with that, but I hope you guys share those events that are happening this month in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Yes, Missouri.
I guess a few technical issues. I'm still not receiving emails from the DAC at ncprd.com. I do receive an email periodically saying release all emails, of which I click release all and I don't get any emails. Second technical issue, Director Savas posted a link. We cannot copy links, at least I cannot on my Linux box. I cannot click on that link either. It is not a hyperlink. So you would have to manually type in all of those characters, which would be very frustrating. Some of us met at the Jennings Lodge School during this weekend to gather more community members about what is to take place at the park. I encourage anyone who's interested to email dac@ncprd.com, of which I'm hopefully Grover will answer and coordinate you with the group that we're trying to create. We don't have a name for this group, but some of the members of the community are trying to band together to create the funnel of ideas and information. My last point is more of a comment about River Villa in terms of like, I was a hooligan, I would still say I'm a hooligan. Fences, I'll say that again. I really hope we don't turn into a place to where our solution is to throw up a fence and waste the money there. As a hacker, you could easily hack a fence if it is automated. So or what stops people from parking on streets and walking with their modified vehicles? So I encourage us to think outside of the box and talk to these hooligans. Hooligans will generally appreciate being talked to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, hooligan. Thank you, Missouri. Katie.
Yes, I wanted to share that in my area, a couple of members, Lindsay and Jeanette, have started meeting and they have a volunteer tracking for the Justice property. So that's been good to see. I'm sure they'll be happy to see that there is a timeline update on that. And I think that is probably the biggest sub area 3 update right now.
Thank you, Katie. And I wanted to also talk about the Jennings Lodge group, but Missouri did that. I won't do that. There are a number of people who are asking about the promised update for the task force around the Concord Park plan, rolling it out to beyond. And I thought it was going to be in January. So is that still scheduled for January?
Yeah, Cindy Becker is the one that's coordinating that, and I know that she last time she and I spoke, there was a proposed or a tentative date that they were looking at. I don't even know what the date is, just that it was towards the end of January.
Okay.
But I haven't heard anything more. But I know that that is the intent, that there would be a combined task force library board DAC invited meeting.
Okay, so Cindy Becker's the person to check with on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm assuming once she's got it figured out, she'll be sending out information.
Okay. And then the other question I had to do with says the trolley trail safety audit. Is that so I'm now looking at the division report. First of all, I love the amount of meat that's in here. And so I hope Heather's still with us, because it's most of it's well.
Heather had to leave. She had a family commitment at 7.
Yeah, you just have to pass it along to her. I mean, it's great. But shall I just ask her what it means later?
Yeah, I can. I mean, if you're asking just generally what the trolley trail safety audit is we're going to conduct a contracted safety audit that's going to look at different aspects of safety along the trolley trail. I mean, it's been brought to us that there are problems. We want to have some metrics and data to back that up and come up with some strategies if needed. So that'll be getting kicked off.
Great, thanks. And my only other request in that is I love her chart. I just wish we could all agree on how we communicate time. Winter, spring, as opposed to, because in some places it says months. I can live with months. The winter, spring, I mean, we don't define them all the same and so on and so forth. So that's a request, but doesn't change the data. It's great data, just knowing when it means. Could you pass that along to her?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. All right, sir. Director Savas.
Yeah, just Mike, just quick question. I want to follow up and make sure that on that trolley trail safety audit, I assume the answer is yes, but I just want to make sure that both the sheriff's office and the Friends of the Trolley Trail have input and data on some of the issues that have been cited in their meetings and whatnot. So
that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. And Kevin's a regular in those meetings. He'd know stuff too. All right. Any more on the member reports? Okay, and I don't think we're doing anything specifically on the district monthly report unless somebody has a question.
I just have 3 things I wanted to be able to add to that outside of the report itself.
Okay.
But it looks like Anita's got her hand up before that.
Oh, up and down,
it's
up it
down.
is. Go on it. You want to speak now?
Well, I guess, why not? I hope I'm not out of date because I missed the last meeting and I haven't listened to the whole recording, but I'm curious about some things, and I apologize if I'm out of order here, but there were these ideas about people proposing projects, and I think maybe 6 were received or maybe more than that. And I was curious about how people even knew about proposing projects to the district and also which ones were proposed.
We're compiling the list. I covered that earlier. We had, I think, 10 or 11 submissions.
Oh, okay.
8 or 9 of them were for the same project. That was for Altamont Park pathway paving. There were a couple of others that I haven't seen yet. So as I said, I'm going to compile those. Those were really just suggestions for staff to consider to be added into the capital repair and replace budget, the smaller dollar amounts. And that's where I'm hoping to be able to provide a bit more context at next month's meeting regarding kind of finance of where we're at on the budget process and which projects were submitted and which ones are moving forward for budget proposal.
And how does the general public know about this? I couldn't find it on the website, but then I read that it's under financial, and that's how you get to that place where you fill out a form. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, and the time has passed. We had a deadline for submission because we have to start rolling our budget numbers up. But we talked about it for at least 2, if not 3 months at the DAC. The website was up and active. It was put out in communications to the public. So, I mean, we didn't take out any newspaper advertisements, but we did try and make keeping in mind that the overall purpose of the submission forms was less having the entire public, and it was really a chance for the DAC to look at were there projects in that 50,000-ish or under range. But we wanted to open it to the public, and again, we had people submit stuff. I was pleased with the first time, having a process out there. It wasn't a wide variety though, but we did try and get the word out at least in the last 2, if not the last 3 DAC meetings. We talked about this.
Right. Okay, great. And but you don't want any more submissions for a while.
Well, we have to roll our budget up. So in other words, the numbers that are coming in, we're having to start locking some of these things down for us to consider, because I've got to start looking at the overall budget numbers of revenues versus expenditures, et cetera. So that we had I think a good month window that process was open.
So it will open again later, but not right away.
Sure.
Next year.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Super. Yes, Ben.
Oh, just following up on that, Michael, you said like 10 projects were kind of recommended. I'm curious, like.
No, 10 submissions.
10 submissions. Okay. How many people are in the district, and how do you use those versus like, your in-house technical expertise? Because 10 submissions is not representative of the thousands of people that are in the district.
No, and as I said, the idea behind it was a tool for me to use as I'm developing budget recommendations. Projects that, not trying to make it a popularity contest, but if there was a community group out there, a concerned neighbor or something that they wanted to see a project that we weren't aware of, the idea was they're sending those in. I'm not weight scoring, the different submissions. Like I said, 8 or 9 of them were the same project. And there's at least 2 or 3 others, I think. I just don't have specificity on what they are. I'm going to look at them with Kevin because most of them are probably maintenance related or park related, I'm guessing. So I'm going to look at them with Kevin. We have a general time or a general dollar amount we try and shoot for a capital repair and replace budget each year while still keeping some reserve. So we'll see how these projects both compare with, is it really a needed thing? Is it something that we would, just because somebody submitted it, I need to look, is it a good idea? And then is it feasible? Is it within, achievable dollar range? So that's what I want to come back with you all next month, is a bit more of an explanation of what we brought or what was brought in, what my recommendations are from that, along with the rest of the items in the capital repair and replace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ryan.
Just a quick comment. I'm glad. Thank you to the district for putting that up. It's a small first step, but I'm hearing in the last few months, I'm actually hearing a lot of first steps, and we got to realize we can't make these giant leaps right away. Small steps, just like getting the IPM clarified, the study, looking at the system plan outreach and how that's going to affect Metro dollars and how it's going to doing that in our agency. We have terrible outreach, and the system plan is our first big step doing significant outreach. So I know it takes time. We'd love to have it done now, but I'm really seeing the steps start. So I really appreciate that. And then as long as we keep building on that every year, I think we're going to be in a good place. So that wasn't a question, it was more of a comment.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. So we're done with anything on the monthly reports. Oh, Director
Savas has got his hand up.
Yeah, I in a way, I noticed that there's a little bit of interest in the pedestrian map that I put up there. I just want to qualify that it's not a completed built out system. It's more, a vision that this is the areas, these are the streets that they want to build out the sidewalk. So you'll find there's a lot of incomplete pieces of the essential pedestrian network, but this map does not display that. It just displays what the ideal situation is. And I believe it's destination oriented. So between some of that, there are destinations that are factored into what the essential pedestrian network, and it's probably dated, but I'm sure that there's some projects, pedestrian projects that are in the transportation system plan that speak to maybe filling some of those gaps. But just wanted to say, don't expect a built out system when you walk or view any of those streets that are on the map, whether they're blue or green. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything else on reports and comments? Okay. Seeing none. Future dates.
No, Grover, sorry, Chair. I had 3 things that I was trying to bring up and we got sidetracked. The first one is one that I could have done at the beginning of the meeting, but he's new on the job, so let him suffer through the whole meeting before we introduce him. I just brought into the room Dominic Cortinas. I don't know if he's able to turn his screen on, but Dominic is 3 days onto the job. He is our new deputy director. So he just started on Monday. Wanted to just have a chance to let everybody at least know that he's working. Look, Dominic, are you able to hear us at least?
I am able to hear you. It doesn't look like I have an option to turn my screen on.
All right, that may be just
appreciate being part of this process and look forward to getting to know all of you a lot better in the future.
So we're excited to have Dominic on. I just wanted to have a chance, at least for people to hear his voice. Apparently, you'll get to see plenty of him, but we're very excited to have him on. He comes from coastal Oregon, where he's been for the last year or so, but originally in the Walla Walla area, and he's got family in Beaverton. Really excited to get to work with him. So more to come on that. The only other two things outside of the division report, which again, thank you for all the nice comments. We'll pass that on. And if anybody ever has any questions or anything about anything in those, please feel free to send us an email and we'll get it answered as quick as we can. The other two things. First one, our conditional use permit for the Concord building has been approved with conditions. We've got some things we need to do, like fencing in the dumpsters and getting new bike racks and a few other striping, noticing things for safety outside. We anticipate that'll take a few weeks to get done, but the conditional use has been approved. So we're happy to see that. The only other thing, I think it was in the division reports, but the year in review, which is our statistical kind of recap of everything that happened last year, is on the website or is online and is not technically published yet. What we want is we're looking for your feedback. So it's a very hard website to remember. It's ncprd.yearinreview.com. So if you could go to that at some point in the next week before the 17th, if you've got any comments, please contact us. Let us know if you see something that's glitchy, if something doesn't make sense. Melina and her team want to get this out and published, so we are asking for that 17th turnaround. But we're happy to have this great year in review for the public to be able to celebrate all the great things that NCPRD did last year. So those are the only things. I know we're running a little over time, so I'll leave it at that and just thank all the staff for the great work that they've done in 2022. We've got a lot of great, exciting things that are happening in 2023, and we're happy to have everybody here dedicating all of this volunteer time. Thank you all so much. It is truly appreciated.
Thank you. And I echo the part about it's great to keep hearing a first step, or another step, another step. Okay. So that leads us to future dates. February submissions, the deadline is January 18th, end of at 5 o'clock. Finalize the agenda Monday, January 23rd. And I look forward to anyway. And then next DAC meeting is February 8th. And it has planned agenda topics, general capital project timeline. As it sits now, is there any other further business? Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Have a good night, everybody.